Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Welcome, folks, to our next discussion on the 8 stations. And if I have it right, the next one we're going to discuss is the 5th station, the station of the significant. But before we go there, there was quite a kind of a long question that Shama mailed me. So I've got it here. So she wanted to know this station 4, the station of separation, which we discussed yesterday. And she indicated that adolescents are concerned with form, particularly in the beginning of the stage, or wanting to conform to their peer group. But this also predominates a great deal in adulthood. Now, so that's true, and we will discuss this in the next section. So what I'm suggesting, though, is that we experience adolescence as being rebellious in principle, whereas in fact, in the beginning, that sense of rebellion is really, it's a conservatism disguised as rebellion, is the point that I'm trying to make. They only appear to be rebellious. Actually, they're conforming to the peer group. The rebellion is actually a rebellion against the parents. The role of the parents, on the other hand, which is the next station, the station of the significant, is really about it's if you like, true conformity. It's conformity that's concerned with actually making the society work. These people are actually very resistant to change, and it's really where we spend most of our adult lives. So it's probably from about 20 to 40, depending on the person. So maybe I can describe the next station, Shama, and then we can come back and see if that answers your concern. So just to remind ourselves, this station of separation is really, this is the adolescent seeking to stand out, seeking to be significant. And in that sense, becoming really quite alienated and sort of pushing as far into the world as they can. So if you have a look at this, the idea of the window of perception, the idea of being a pop star kind of most floats your boat, I think, when you're 18 years old. I mean, this idea of having the adulation of millions. And as I indicated yesterday, some people take regrettably long to actually get through this period of their lives, where they want to sort of be seen to be the significant one, be seen to stand out, be out there, be kind of like alone on the stage. We also indicated that this station is pinned between these two opposites, binary opposites of form and meaning. We start off playing the conservative drum of form and basically saying that although it appears that the adolescent is going through a rebellion, actually they're actually quite conformist. They're conforming to the requirements of the peer group. But that conforming to the requirements of the peer group over time becomes an increasingly increasing concern for real meaning, which is then also, if you like, where we get the birth of a social conscience and the birth of an environmental conscious. And that desire for that sort of birth of consciousness is then also kind of the birth of a real sense of responsibility. And it's that sense of responsibility that then catapults us, if you like, or pushes us into the stage of the significant. Now, and this is the station of most adults, is the station of the significant. The station of the significant is really concerned with designating what is significant in the first instance. I mean, so adults are, this is true for adults in two ways. It's inwardly true and it's outwardly true. It's inwardly true because adults are the ones who are, every adult takes on a kind of like a custodial charge of a part of the world. Um, um, Also, not only do they take on a custodial charge, they are also the ones that actually designate what is significant and what is not significant. So in that sense, we talk about a deeply conservative state of being, where it's really about making society work. You see, in early adolescence, that conformity isn't about making society work. It's not trying to find balance. It's really just about being part of a peer group. Whereas this station of the significant is the conformity of adulthood, but that conformity really is concerned with establishing what's equitable and establishing a sense of balance. So people in this station of their lives are really trying to make things work to the best of their ability. And in a sense, what they're trying to balance are the contradictory kind of requirements of the outward and the inward. And as we indicated, every station starts off, it has these two drums, and one of the drums is conservative and the other drum is the more kind of progressive drum. So the conservative drum in the station of the significant is outwardness. So so in the beginning of this this period of one's life, you maybe have a young family, you've got kids, you get woken up at 3 o'clock every morning, you are doing the pajama parade, you have a tremendously demanding boss and a demanding job, and there really just isn't enough of you to go around. I can remember in this part of my life, actually doing inner work was impossible. In my late 20s to my mid 30s, it was almost impossible to meditate, because whenever I meditated, I fell asleep. And it was because I was just deeply exhausted. I was exhausted from trying to make the whole thing work. You know, earning the keep for the family, holding down a small business, you know, dealing with sick kids, and in early adulthood, the demands of the world out there are incredibly exhausting. So all of your attention is cast out there, but this time your attention isn't cast out there in a sort of a self-serving way, like it is with the adolescent trying to become the significant one or trying to stand out. Your attention is cast out there with the intent to be the custodian, with the intent to be the one who does the looking after. So this station is deeply exhausting. And what happens as we progress through this period of our lives, we start seeing our kids start growing up and we start approaching our midlife crisis. What's actually happening as we start to realize that, you know, I mean, in a sense, I also have rights. So you know, I've got to get my life back. You know, you meet the you know, so we'll sort of deal with this possibly again later, but you know, this thing of somebody's midlife crisis is really quite an intriguing phenomenon, because you see really responsible people who, for most of their adult lives, were really fine and upstanding citizens, suddenly doing the most outrageously irresponsible things. And if you confront them on this, the text is the same. And the text is, you know, what about me? I've worked so hard. I've, you know, committed all of this this endeavor to put the kids through school, to provide for the family, to make some sense of security for my kin. If I'm running a business, to make sure that the business survives. You know, so added to the burden of having on your conscience the good of your family, you still have on your conscience the good of everybody in the business, and the however many families are dependent on the business. And this is, being an adult is enormously exhausting. And at some point, you do ask yourself, well, what's in it for me? I mean, I'm just being used up here. These people are using me as a resource. They're actually being quite shameless. So there's as we move through adulthood, there's this incremental move away from taking care of the thing out there, and there's more and more making space for your own pursuits. So the guy discovers golf at the age of 38, becomes a very keen golfer. Or the woman, Sunny, discovers cycling and becomes a keen cyclist. Or a third person suddenly joins a dhikr group. Or there's some activity which is really, the person is saying, there's got to be something for me in all of this. I can't just be mom's taxi. I can't just be the one who's dedicating my entire life to everybody out there and there's nothing left for me. So that kind of increasing awareness of my own needs, sort of this pulling in, this playing of this inward drum eventually then starts to play so loud that you flip into the next phase, which is kind of like, so you can see what sits between this phase of the significant and the phase of meaning is kind of a midlife crisis. I mean, in a sense, the midlife crisis is this area, going into the phase of meaning. And it's really about saying, I need to find out what is truly meaningful. I mean, this thing of being the one who makes it all work no longer floats my boat. So towards the end of this period, towards the end of this period of adulthood, we get far more interested in inward kind of pursuits and spending time with ourselves. It's this issue of life balance seems like Greek to somebody in their mid-20s, but somebody in their late 30s will start to take issues of life balance really seriously. And it is this insistence on life balance and a desire for life balance which really sets up the midlife crisis. Right, folks, so that is the stage of the significant. Are there any questions? So, Farzal, is resentment necessary? You see, I think resentment is necessary in the move from this third station. So remember, the third station is the station of the child in middle childhood, the prepubescent child. The move from here, one of the engines of the move from the outward to separation, which is the stage of the adolescent, is resentment. And it's really resentment concerned with fundamental envy and jealousy. I'm also significant, because one of the attributes of competitiveness is envy. And envy is, if you like, a cousin of resentment. So I think resentment is one of the things that move us from childhood into adolescence, and you can almost see that as when you look at the kind of the narrative that sits behind the so-called generational, the battle of the generations. There's always an accusation that sits behind it somewhere of the older generation for whatever. I mean, either too conservative or right. From the fifth to the sixth station. It's not necessary, Farsal. I don't think resentment is necessarily necessary because some sort of dissatisfaction is necessary, But the move actually only takes place when the dissatisfaction is really aimed at what is aimed at the self. So while I'm still accusing the world, if I'm saying I'm being exhausted by my life and that's all their fault and they're just using me up, and I act on that sentiment, what actually happens is that I can, in a sense, retrogress back to being an adolescent. And that really does happen very often to people in their midlife crisis. So once I start realizing I'm making the wrong thing significant here, so it is a resentment of a kind, but if you like, it's a resentment in itself. It's like, I'm making the wrong thing. It's taking responsibility for what it feels like in my own skin. I'm exhausted, and it's not their fault. I'm not leaving enough space for myself. That's when you have the move towards meaning. But if you're in the station of the significant and you allow the narrative to be stuck on resentment, you will end up oscillating back to being an adolescent. And we see this with people. Some people are very ineloquent with their midlife crisis. I mean, they kind of, they buy themselves the Harley Davidson, they put their hair in a ponytail, they put the pretty blonde on their knee, but they're still the miserable people they were before. So Zuhaib, people are generally divided into extroverts and introverts. Introverts tend to be focused more on inward pursuits pretty early. How does the transition of meaning differ for the two? Zuhaib, I have to admit, I haven't thought about that. And I would be speculating to make a call on that. I don't actually know enough about Jungian psychology to make a call about that. This distinction between the introvert and the extrovert, or these are really Jungian categories. Yes, that's a wonderful. So iPad Pro 11. When a person starts thinking, "What's in it for me?" is that being selfish? This is the problem with. So here's the problem. You see that there's the move from the fifth to the sixth station can appear to be amoral or immoral, because it does seem as if the person is now being really concerned with their own interests. Why is it that the person no longer wishes to take responsibility? So here's one of the attributes of this thing. You could have the person being very aggressive in pursuing their career, and they're about to get the final promotion, which would be the pinnacle of their career, but they're kind of in their late 40s, early 50s, and they offered and they just don't take it. They say it's not worth it. They don't want it. What happens is, and actually they're no longer willing to carry the burden of the responsibility. Now, I don't think that's selfish. I think it's making space for the next generation, actually. I mean, it's learning how to eloquently step back and making space. Yeah, but it can appear selfish from the outside. Zahida, the battle with what you just spoke about. So when you have kids, etc., you know what's coming. So aren't we giving to give while still making time for self without feeling dissatisfied? Isn't that wanting to be significant and black? Oh, Zaida, I don't understand what you're asking. Maybe you can try and ask that differently. You see, the problem, this is the problem with the intent. And, we really should have started off with the intent model properly. I will end off this series on the intent model. I'll add another interaction at the end of this series if you're interested. And we'll do one more, and it'll be on the intent model. But you see, so that giving to give, that's intent language. And that giving to give is it still has a moral feel about it. And giving to give means I'm unconditionally doing the right thing. Why am I doing the right thing? Because I want things to work. That's what these people in this station of the significant do. They are taking charge of the social affair. They're making the thing work. They are working themselves to death, making the thing work. The worst thing you can say to people in this station is to accuse them of doing what they're doing for selfish reasons. They find that deeply injurious because they really aren't. They really are trying very hard to serve everybody else. But, we're not here to serve everybody else. Serving everybody else is a way station. It's not a destination. We're here to witness that Allah works. And at some level, this idea of working ourselves to death to make the world work is kind of arrogating to ourselves something which is really Allah's responsibility. So in a sense, we need to learn how to vacate the arena. We need to step back, get out of the arena so that we can witness that He's in charge. But while we're in charge trying to make everything work, that never happens. So, yeah, anyhow, that's if I understood your question. I'm not entirely sure I understood the question. Yeah, you see, this is why the language of intent is not helpful. I said this at the beginning, Nahid. So this needs to find yourself as a selfish act, or is it necessary for one's own self? You see, the discourse, whether it's selfish or not selfish, is itself a moral discourse. And that's why the whole issue of intent is inadequate to get to the latter stages of our lives. What do you say to the person who becomes a complete fakir at the age of 40? Is like you do in India, actually. Lots of people do this. The person has put their kids through school, they've earned their dues, suddenly they just leave and they become a wandering fakir. What do you say? Is that person just being selfish, or what's that person doing? You can't actually account for what's happening with that person on the basis of social conscience, because in a sense they are reneging on their social responsibilities. Imam Ghazali did that. He was a very successful jurist. And one day he decided this thing of being the one, in fact, he almost the model of the significant, the adult person who is the custodian, he vacated his position. He walked into the desert and disappeared for a decade. There you go. When I'm confused, resentment and dissatisfaction both have negative connotations. Are there some positive factors that are involved in the transition of stage 5 to 6? Yes, and that is you've seen through the charade, and you actually want what's truly significant. You want what's truly meaningful. You see that the trappings of being the big person, the person that everybody looks up to, the one at the head of the table, the one that everybody kind of honors, and the pater familias or the mater familias, the mother of the family, the father. That thing, that's now for the young ones. I mean, leave me alone to my tea. I mean, you want stuff of real significance, or rather real meaning. So that's not necessarily aimed. So you see, when it is, there is a dissatisfaction. There's a dissatisfaction that is inherent in the move from kind of being the person who is having a successful career to being a person who spends much more time on their own, because you recognize that all this outward success does not slake the thirst in the heart. So there is a dissatisfaction. That dissatisfaction doesn't need to be kind of bitter resentment. It's not kind of all bitter and twisted. And if it does become bitter and twisted, then as I indicated before, you have a misfire in your midlife crisis. You end up behaving like an adolescent, and you don't actually use that sense of dissatisfaction for what it should be used for. But make no mistake, a person who doesn't experience a sense of dissatisfaction with their worldly achievements, with the fact that they've succeeded in being the custodian of something, if that at some level does not scratch an itch, that does not leave an itch unscratched, then then I suppose the person should stay there for a little bit longer. But the true pursuit of inner work requires a dissatisfaction with the conventional. I realized today that everyone's station is granted to them. It's akin to kufr then to try to change it for somebody else. Yes, that's true. That's true. The only person whose station you should be concerned with is your own. Although it's useful to have a compass, because it's very entertaining to watch each other going. It's like we're all on a journey, you know. I mean, so explain to me this. This is an intriguing phenomenon. People have get great entertainment from watching on television sports like marathons. Now, I mean, that's, you know, it's people running down the road. I mean, they're going for like 40 kilometers, and you watch them on television. What is a really strange thing to do with a perfectly good Saturday afternoon. So, and why is that? Because people want to kind of see where other people are, and there's not even necessarily a judgment with it. It's just a curiosity. So, view this as a marathon tool to see how people are kind of faring in their own journey. Sometimes the afia, it is a kindness to somebody. So if you see somebody getting stuck, right, I mean, they can really deal with their midlife crisis in a far more eloquent way. It's sometimes useful to tell them, listen, you know, that other motorcycle is not going to scratch the itch. Or, dare I say, this affair you're having is not going to scratch the itch. Thanks, Almas. If you are not married, this is Miriam's question. If you're not married or have kids well into their 30s, you may end up with a confused sense of self-worth with their progression from their Miriam, I must admit, I don't entirely understand the question. Okay. Thank you. All right, folks, and thanks for the help there on the introvert and the extrovert, Ferouz. So, folks, thank you very much. I've yet again had great fun at your expense, as I normally do. And we'll meet each other at the same place tomorrow. I'll turn this into a video, and I'll put it on our group. Thank you very much. Tomorrow we will speak about the stage of the meaning, the station of meaning, and you can already start playing with the model yourself now. You can start saying, well, how is it that I end up with meaning when I move away from the conservative drum of the outward to the progressive drum of the inward in the station of the significant? And when I'm in the station of meaning, why is meaning the apex? And why am I moving from separation to gatheredness? Thank you very much, folks. All the best.